a lot of times the military people will go to another organization, even if the organization says that they want military people. But when you get there, they really don't, because they really don't want the truth. They don't want somebody to tell them the truth and give them candid feedback. And a military person is not going to take crap.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And folks, clean hats are a problem. Mm-hmm. You know, those of us that are hat fellas, we got hats that we like, and we got hats that just hang, and then we got hats that we wear. I think that's about all the category, right, Kim?
I think so. You know, there's different levels of wearing out. And to me, it's just like jeans or boots, where it's like you got your nice ones, and you wear it out one too many times, and it becomes an everyday hat, and then or an everyday pair of boots, and then they get beat up real bad. And you go, you know what? These are work boots now. This is a work hat, and yeah, that's the trick. I was going to ask you actually, though, Dad, because I will occasionally actually wash those old hats. Do you have a washing method? Is there some old school trick you didn't pass down to me?
Nah, throw it in the dishwasher, upper rack. Don't waste your money on one of them hat holder things. If you and it does work, but it ain't gonna.
I do about 15 minutes in some hot soapy water in the sink, and then throw them out in the Arizona sun and call it good.
Man, well, you're bleaching it even more if you're putting it out in the sun.
Yeah, you know that's probably a factor. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, our good friend and guest joining us, Carl. Carl, being a Marine, hats were a very important part of being a Marine, weren't they?
Yes, sir. Everybody had a cover.
Yes, sir. The two-finger octagon, right?
Right.
The original octagon. I mean, Marines were doing octagon before UFC even knew how to count the octagon. Isn't that right? You know, and pardon me, because I just flashed back because I never got to do it. Something I always wanted to do is the pugil sticks. Do you remember? You did that in basic, right?
Is that the?
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to do the pugil sticks. Mm-hmm.
Oh no! That's, you know why, folks. You know why? Because Carl was a special person. He was a pilot. They don't want pilots to get hurt. They leave that to us ground pounders. Beat the crap out of each other. They knew if they threw a pilot in there. They spend a lot of money on you to make you a pilot. They don't want you to get hurt with a stupid pugil stick, do they?
Right.
Get that eyesight all jacked up. Oh yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of it. You know, and what remind me again, Carl, because I know we talked about it, and just so our audience knows, what'd you fly? I can't remember.
Yeah, I flew CH-46 helicopters. It's the frog, similar to the Chinooks in the Army.
Yeah, the banana bird. That's what I called it as a kid growing up. I remember those. Yeah, with the pool of oil right in the middle of the cargo area. Then you know it's safe, right? Right. If that puddle dries up, folks, you best be putting on your life preserver and getting ready to go for a swim if you're in a CH-46. So, Carl, when you jumped into the business world, what was something in that the flight time that you're like, all right, this is the same thing as driving a helicopter in business?
Yeah, I think that the key thing when I left the military and I entered corporate America, I worked for Procter and Gamble. And my first
big company.
My first boss was a 1972 Naval Academy graduate. So I had a real good opportunity to learn from him, and it wasn't a smooth transition, but it was a whole lot smoother than it would have been.
Because you talked a little bit of the connection going on there.
Exactly. Yeah. And there were other individuals that had graduated, other military people. Because when I joined there was a lot of former Vietnam veterans that were working for Procter & Gamble at the time. So they were all over the place. So it was a great place to learn from others that had similar backgrounds.
So you got
how much does that help you as far as like I always like to think of it as translating the skills and understanding that it's like, hey, you have all of these skills, what does it actually look like, kind of like you said, Dad, what did you learn in the flight time that you could apply there? How did having those folks around you help to kind of jumpstart that process a bit? Like you said, it still wasn't perfect, but I'm sure that was a big help.
Yeah, that was huge because I come to a culture in the organization that had similar values. A lot of times the military people will go to another organization, even if the organization says that they want military people. But when you get there, they really don't, because they really don't want the truth. They don't want somebody to tell them the truth and give them candid feedback. And a military person is not going to take crap, and if it's not working after about a year, they'll bounce out because of misalignment of values.
So when you stepped into that role, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I'm doing the math. Procter and Gamble probably has more people than there are in the Marine Corps, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, just a few more. Yeah.
I mean, an Army guy wouldn't say that, but a Marine, because the Marines are pretty small. Did the enormity of that corporation, did it feel a little overwhelming, or did you have I think what I really was curious about is that the mentoring, it sounds like you got that just happened to occur for you. Was that a big plus for you?
It was. Matter of fact, they did a real good job before you even took the job of introducing you to some people that were in the organization. So there were several prior military people that I got a chance to meet before I joined the company. And then when I joined the company, they were there to give guidance and feedback if you were willing to listen.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people.
Go ahead.
I just want to help bust a myth, because people look at large corporations and think, well, they're just about the numbers, right? And it sounds like, at least at the time when you stepped into Procter and Gamble, they were about the people. Is that how you'd assess it?
Yeah, it was a very good organization. We started up the plant. The plant was started up before I got there, and it was the best startups in the company's history in the whole paper division. And they used team building, strategic planning, visioning. They had visioning sessions with the head of the plant, as well as the three different levels. Get in a room, talk about the vision, come out united. And actually, the plant was kind of modeled after the military, because traditional plants would have a supervisor, right? And then you have people, and the supervisors were managers. So we created an organization where there was we called them a team leader, kind of like an NCO that ran the shift, right? So if you had a 3-shift operation, you had the 3-shift team leaders, and then you had a team manager over those 3 shifts. And that's kind of the way we organized it.
What I was going to ask, and actually, I think it kind of plays into the same area of the culture, is Carl, you mentioned getting some of that perspective of meeting some other folks inside when you first got the job, getting that kind of organizational perspective. How do you think that shaped your view inside of that giant entity? Because I think that's one thing, it can get viewed as a little bit of a waste of time. I think some people would say, it's like, oh yeah, no, let's say Carl and make sure he understands everything happening here and goes, shakes the hands and all those kind of things. And you're like, man, we just need to get him to work. But that does provide you a perspective for that big organization and how you fit into it. What was that like?
Yeah, one of the things that I did was I read a book by Tony Robbins, and he talked about learning from the best of the best. So that was one of my missions. When I got there, I would actually meet with, because I wanted to be a plant manager. That was kind of my goal when I got there. So I would meet with people that were either a plant manager or one level below that were very successful. I sit down with them, tell them a little bit about myself, tell them a little bit about yourself, and kind of tell me the tricks of the trade. One of the things I found out was I wanted to be a plant manager. So in order to be a plant manager, 90% of the people that became plant managers would come in, entry-level position, and have an operational role with people and a staff role. Get promoted, have an operational role with people and a staff role with people. And then you get promoted to the next level, right? But I saw people doing staff, or operation, and not getting promoted because they didn't understand the system.
That's really interesting because that's so similar to what the military does, isn't it? You know, whether you're an NCO or an officer, you go lead troops, then you go do some staff job, then you go back and lead troops and at the next rank, and you continue on. That just makes me curious about, you know, something I've always told, or I do always tell the guys that I coach that are transitioning out of the military, that it's no longer linear like the military, you know, E1, E2, E3, that once you get into the corporate world, it becomes nonlinear in the promotions. Was Procter and Gamble much more, was it that close to the military where you still had a linear path to advancement?
I think it's a lot like the military in that you still got to have relationships with people up above you. and if you know, that's the key thing, you know, and that's the secret sauce. I mean, you have to do well in whatever you do. But at the same time, you have to develop relationships so that person will want you in that position, whatever that position is. And a lot of times it might not be a glamorous position, but the person needs you to do it to help them out, and the dividends will be paid out later on.
You know, I think that's an interesting thing, Carl, talking about the relationships there, because I think sometimes they can almost have a like bad connotation to it. That it's like, oh, you know, it's not just am I good at my job, but it's, oh, did I kiss ass enough? I think it's what we kind of read into it. It's not necessarily that. There is a real thing there though. If it's like, look, if I'm going to promote one of you two, and I like working with Carl, you're going to promote it because I want to work with the person I want to work with, right? I'm not going to promote that. You'd have, like Otis in that example, if I don't want to work with you, you'd have to be a lot better than Carl. Like that, I think there's a natural reason for that. Could you talk some of your perspective there, Carl, of like, what is the good version of playing into those relationships, and maybe how to avoid that bad version where it's just a relationship without hitting that bottom line and those kind of things?
I think it needs to be genuine. And simplistically, if I could boil it down, basically what you want to do is you want to find out what your boss's needs are. Once you understand what the needs are, then you fulfill those needs, whatever it is, assuming it's ethical, right? And simplistically, that's what it's about, you know? And I always got that information on the front end. What do I need to do to be successful? How can I help you? Understand what those are and go make it happen.
Amazing how much it just goes back to that kind of simple question, because that's so true. It makes you think, you know, we were talking rugby a little bit before you hopped on here. Best thing somebody can ask is like, hey, what do I need to do better? Hey, here's your things. Boom, boom, boom. Now I'm watching for those things. We're all on the same page. I mean, gosh, it sucks how much it comes back to communication. Yep. So cheesy almost, isn't it, Dad? We joke about this all the time.
I'll tell you an experience that I had. So I was working for the company. We were starting up Love's Diapers. And I was a shift manager. My boss, again, was a Naval Academy graduate. So after about 6 months, I got my first formal feedback session with him. So I got the information. I had to fill out how I thought I did and give that to him. And he would talk to several of his peers, same question, and he'd get that information. Then he'd fill out one. So then we had a meeting. So in this meeting, I thought I did a pretty good job. We had a real good startup. First 6 months, I'm kicking it right. And but the feedback wasn't good at all. And I'm thinking, what? And he asked me this question. He says, what are you going to do with the feedback? I says, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. They've already made up their mind. He says, this is what you can do. You go back to those individuals, tell them what the feedback was, and ask them what you need to do differently to reverse the feedback. So that's what I did. 6 months later, totally different. They said you didn't solve problems. You didn't really get in there with the technicians and make sure that the problems got solved. You kind of stood back, you know? So they gave me some feedback like that, and I did it. It was like night and day.
That's interesting because I think there's that fine line when you start to get into leadership roles like that of how deep do I put my hands into the problem and how much do I let my subordinates figure it out? And it sounds like in that perspective, that feedback loop you got is you should at least put your finger in the hole or something at least once, right?
Right. And it could be different for different people. For example, you could have two different bosses that have two different expectations. One wants you to make all the decisions. One wants you to make none of the decisions. And you just need to understand that.
Back to the asking your boss, well, how do I succeed in the role? I think that's it's a simple phrase, but well, what's your opinion on why folks are hesitant to ask that question?
They don't want to get fired. Sorry to steal an answer there, but I think there is something to that.
It's a good question because people don't do it. I tell people all the time, and here's they don't do it because when you think about the environment and you think about this is not only in manufacturing, military, everything. 80% of the time you're going to get negative feedback. When somebody says, I'm going to give you feedback, it's negative. So nobody wants to hear that, right? So that's the thing. But if you ask the question, what I found is that I'll give you this example. So again, my MO was to learn from the best of the best. So I was at a mentoring program at Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati, Ohio at the time. The president of the company was there, John Pepper was the president of Procter & Gamble at the time, right? So he's at this event. And people are not talking to him because it's kind of like the pretty girl syndrome. Everybody thinks the pretty girl has a date. Mm-hmm. So nobody's talking to the president, right? So I said, I want to have a conversation with the president. What can I do and what can I say? I said, okay, I got it. So I went up to him and I said, Mr. Peppers, we've never spoken before, but we have a lot in common. He says, really, what is that? I said, you like to mentor young people. I like to mentor young people. He says, wow. I said, I'd love to have a conversation with you sometime. He says, great. I'd like to have that too. I said, what do I need to do to make that happen, Mr. Pepper? He said, call my administrative assistant and tell her to set up some time for me. 2 weeks later, I'm in the president of Procter & Gamble's office asking him, what do you think I need to do to be successful? I've done that did that with the fastest track and plant manager at Procter & Gamble at the time. He was a former Army officer. He had gotten to plant manager faster than anybody else, right? So I go and sit down and have this conversation with him. And I said, what's the secret sauce? This is what he said. Mm-hmm. He said, the first thing I do when I get a new assignment is I sit down with my boss and I tell him, I ask this question. What do I need to do to maximize my pay? Mm. And if he or she tells me that and I deliver that, then I'm going to maximize my pay. And everything, you follow the money. It's not what do I need to do to get promoted? Because you might get promoted and not max out your pay. If you say, what do I need to do to max out my pay? You max out the pay, everything else follows. Mm. But you got to ask.
It shows that you're speaking the business language. You're speaking their language now too. It's not just, hey, I want to move up. It's how can I get a return on our investment as a team?
I mean, if you think about it, if somebody comes to you and says they want to learn from you, who's going to turn that down? That's very flattering.
It is because I use that as a kind of a forcing function when I'm teaching these guys about transition, and you and I spoke about this the other day when we were talking those 1,000 cups of coffee to build that network. And yeah, there's very, very few people that if you ask, say, hey, man, I'd like to learn more about what you do in your industry. Man, there are few and far between people that will not take what they say is priority. This is about making money. This is always priority. Oh, you want to learn about that? You want me to teach you about? Sure. I will change my calendar. I've seen it happen many, many times. And you're validating that it's been happening that way for a long time, hasn't it?
Yeah. And it happens in the military. It happens in union environments, non-union environments, executive suites, school system, happens everywhere. Families.
That's right. Grandma would love to tell you some stories, wouldn't she?
What's interesting to me talking about this is that so much of it, whether from the leader perspective or the one out seeking that advice, seeking that guidance, is how much of it just kind of goes back to the personal taste a little bit of, are you the person looking for the guidance? Are you the person that's willing to give the guidance, right? I'm wondering, Carl, then, what are your thoughts on how you try to systemize these things? Because this is where it always gets interesting. The leadership stuff, it makes sense when you got people that all speak that same language, but now I got to move 100 people doing that same thing, and it gets a little bit trickier. That personal taste has a wide variety there, I would say, right? What is your thoughts on kind of trying to systemize these pieces of advice and feedback and organizational perspective, like we've been talking about?
Yeah, I think it all starts at the top with leadership, and if you are a role model for this type of behavior that we're talking about, then your subordinates will model that behavior, and you'll create a culture where that type of behavior is rewarded. And if you don't have that type of behavior, it doesn't get rewarded. And you can have the same thing in a toxic environment too. If the leader's toxic, and you can have the best leadership principles in the world, but if they don't value that, then it's not going to be a good place to be. But I think
any examples come to mind for that? Because I think that's one of those that you're right. It's hard to picture that it's like a good leader who's rewarding the wrong things. What does that look like?
Good leader. Good leader reward. Well, some of the best training I got was through my dog named Sheik, who was a thoroughbred German Shepherd. Anybody, y'all have pets? Okay, so I grew up with Lassie and Rin Tin Tin. So my goal was to get a dog. After I got out of the military, I got me a German Shepherd, 6 weeks old, Sheik de Albany. I lived in Albany, Georgia. Sheik de Albany. So I'm walking in the neighborhood, and Sheik was about 6 weeks old at the time. And I run into this man who had a Doberman. The Doberman was trained on lead, off lead. I'm talking to the guy. I said, man, I'd like to have my dog obedience trained. He says, really? Well, I think I can do that. I can take your dog for 3 weeks and then work with you, and I can really get the dog up to speed. And I said, do you really think my dog can learn that? He says, I'm not worried about the dog. I'm worried about you. So part of the training was simplistically is you want to find the dog doing something good and reward the dog. When you find the dog doing something that's not good, you quickly correct them and forget about it and look for something good and praise them up. And it's the same thing with people. Accurate, timely, specific feedback. And the feedback can be in a lunchroom on a napkin.
I think that's such a good point that a lot of folks forget how it doesn't have to be a formal session. And truthfully, the best setup is not where you wait until that formal session every 6 months or annually or whatever. I mean, the Army, the Special Forces in particular, we were terrible about that. Hell, I'd be willing to bet money that they're still the same way. It's, oh crap, your fit rep is due. I gotta give you some feedback. That sort of sense, and the excuse of we're mission focused, blah blah blah. Well, daggum, it's such a dichotomy, I think, is what it is. Let's flip the switch. You stepped into, sounds like a really good organization at Procter & Gamble where they had mentors. You asked some questions, which helped, but you sure as hell could have stepped into an organization where they just shut you down and said, hey, look here, buddy, new guy, go over there and do what the hell I told you to do, and never gotten anything out of it. Let's flip it and put you back on top in that leadership role. How did you and do you do that feedback loop with your with the folks that work for you?
Yeah, kind of the same process. When I got them, we'd sit down and identify. I had what I call a join up process. I would sit down with individuals that came to my organization. And if I went to a new organization, I would sit down with people that were in the organization, and we'd go like this. I would say, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. And I'll be as transparent as I can, right? And then I asked them to tell me a little bit about themselves, where they grew up, married, kids, what do you like to do, that kind of thing, and have that conversation. And then I say, what do you think we need to do to make this organization better? Understand that. What do you think are the strengths and the weaknesses of this organization? What can I help you with, career-wise, as well as personal, right? Because you don't check your family at the door. So if you have a special needs child and you don't have the ability to give them the proper care, that's going to be a problem, right? So if they share that or something like that with me and I solve that problem, I got a friend for life. And I'm just doing that with the organization. So I'm creating an army that's leading interference for me in the organization.
You know, there's one layer that you mentioned earlier, Carl, which I thought was interesting, talking about like, why are people scared to ask for feedback? And it's because a lot of the times it's negative. I think there's this interesting thing where, like, as the leaders, our job in a lot of ways is to find those negative things. You know, the amount of times, I must say this at least once a week out coaching rugby, I'm like, hey, sorry guys, you know, my job is to poke holes in everything you're doing. Like that is my purpose out here, right? Now, in rugby, it's really great because on Saturday I get to go play someone else and we beat the crap out of them and I can go, see, it's all worth it. I have this really shiny thing I can point to. You don't really get that in business as much. If Carl's coming in poking holes in my work all day, I don't got a game on Saturday where Carl's going to be, hey, Cam, it was all worth it, wasn't it? I'm just back to the office on Monday. There's a different relationship there. So what are your thoughts, Carl, on that feedback being negative? Because there's a necessity for that because that's how we get better. But at the same time, you got to build in some sort of like, I don't know, the compliment sandwich comes to mind and, you know, the generic crap like that. But really, what's your perspective on, you know, trying to be more positive with that feedback?
So the other thing that I would say in this conversation that I would have with these individuals is, if you see me doing something to an individual or the organization that's going to hurt the organization, I need you to tell me that as soon as possible. And once they do that, I've got to say, thank you very much, even if I don't agree with it. Right? Now, if they come to me with things, my first question is, they come to me with the problem. My first question is, okay, tell me what it is. What are your thoughts? If I can get them to solve the problem, I don't have to worry about it. It's because, you know, and it's, let's say they come, it's an issue, a problem, whatever, and they have a suggestion. I have another suggestion. If I think their suggestion will work, I say, go make it happen. They own it. So that's kind of how I would, you know, so you're always looking for improvement. And the sooner you can find it, the better off you are. Because if you have an organization that doesn't give accurate, timely, and specific feedback, then it'll hang around until it's too late, and then it's worse than it was.
And I think a nuance there also, Carl, is by shifting into solutions is now we're talking back in the positive. It's not, hey, you were really bad at this. It's we addressed you might have been bad there, but we're already over here on the solution trying to get things back forward. I think that's a huge piece.
Yep.
Can you share any stories? You have any about that? Because I think that's such a great thing, and I know with all your experience in the corporate and manufacturing world, I'd love to hear a story where that's turned it around.
Okay,
with somebody.
I'll give you one. So, fresh out of the military, been in this fast-paced organization, starting up Love's Diapers, hitting on all cylinders, and I had developed kind of a mindset of having to be there all the time and get stuff done, right? So my team leader, who was equivalent to the NCO, pulled me to the side one day and said, Carl, you're micromanaging. You don't need to do that. So I started making excuses for it. He says, okay, all right, keep doing what you're doing.
He's calling you out.
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Oh, yeah.
You keep doing what you're doing. You're going to get what you get. And I listened. And I flipped the script and it worked.
Yeah, that gets to one of the things I think we talk about a lot, which is there's this need to, put your hand on the hot stove a few times in order to learn that lesson, whether it's leadership or whatever. We do kind of have to learn lessons the hard way a lot of the time. What are your thoughts, Carl, on how to insulate those failures, if you will, so that doesn't become a whole problem? Because you got to let people fail a little bit, but also they can't fail and blow up a whole freaking factory. Like there's got to be some guardrails there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think if you're clear about the boundaries and what the expectations are, I'll give you a quick story about what can happen. So we had an offsite where all of the managers spent a day or two visioning and planning and stuff like that, right? So we had the technicians to run the plant. So this was during the time of where you had mail boxes. So you put mail in boxes and pull it out and stuff like that, right? So after the 2-day retreat, we came back. There was nothing in our boxes because we weren't there exchanging information, but stuff got done. Matter of fact, the plant ran better with us not being there than it was when we were there. So that's an example of really what you're trying to do. You want to empower your people. And if you give them the tools and the resources to do it, they'll do
it. I want to shift gears to the entrepreneur, because, a career in the Marines and then a career in corporate America. I mean, which folks, for most military folks, once you get adjusted to the culture, it feels very comfortable, right? It's just like being in the military in these large corporations. But to step out on your own and create sharp leadership, which you were blessed with a name that works really well with that, dude. Thank your parents and grandparents and all your history back. So,
Dad, write this down. We got to at least explore it. Mick leadership. Let's start
Mick leadership.
There. We'll play with that. All right, we got to start there.
There you go. Well, it doesn't ring like sharp leadership.
It doesn't.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us about that story of stepping away from. I mean, truthfully, it was comfortable, right? I mean, you got a paycheck every 2 weeks. You had vacation, all the benefits, all that stuff in your pocket, and you say, "Yeah, let me go out and do something different." What was that transition like?
Okay, let me tell you how it happened. So, I worked for Procter & Gamble in Albany, Georgia, and then Cincinnati, Ohio. Then I took a job with Frito-Lay in Indianapolis, Indiana. And then took a job with Colgate-Palmolive in Topeka, Kansas. I'm constantly moving west. Parents are living in Virginia. My wife's from Florida. I wanted to live somewhere between those two states. So I took a job as the vice president of manufacturing for Dunlap Slauson, making golf balls in South Carolina, near Clemson, South Carolina, right? So after working there for about a year, probably about 6 months, my boss and I agreed to disagree. Misalignment of values, right? So I get a call from my administrative assistant one day, and she says, the Eagle has landed. The Eagle was my boss from England, and he had landed at my plant, and I didn't know he was going to be there. So that's not a good sign. So I called my wife, and I said, Jackie, Stan is here. I didn't know he was coming. It's probably not going to be a good look, but God will provide. So he comes in the office with the HR manager who I developed a pretty good rapport with. And he says, you know why we're here, right? I says, no, I don't. He said, well, things aren't going well. I says, I agree with that. He said, so we're going to separate, right? So I'm in the right location. I got 6 months severance package, but I don't have a job. So I'm at the crossroad. What do? Do I work for somebody else or do I work for myself? I tried to put my foot in both places for about 2 months, and I said, this ain't working. I said, I need to go ahead and cut bait. So I said, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. So then I called people that I knew, and I said, this is my skill set. I'm looking for this kind of work. So that's kind of how it happened. Now, when I was at Colgate Palmolive, I went to a training program called the Looking Glass Experience, which is in Greensboro, North Carolina. It's one of the top leadership institutes in the world that's non-academic. It was actually patterned after the military in 1971. So I did this program called the Looking Glass Experience, where 21 executives would go in from all different parts of the country and the world, different disciplines. The key thing that they needed to have was they were good people and good leaders. So 21 people go in and take a position in this company, the simulation. Plant manager, 3 vice presidents, 6 directors, and the rest plant managers. So everybody gets a position, and then you run the company how you think it needs to be run, given the situations that they have, right? So what happens is everybody behaves the way they behave at work. It's amazing. So then you have one facilitator that's looking at a division. So one facilitator looking at 7 people. Run a simulation for a day, and then you debrief the simulation the rest of the week. How did the organization impact you? How did you impact the organization? And so you get that feedback constantly. And at the end of that, you make a decision. The question is, you get accurate, timely, specific feedback. A lot of times you've never gotten that before. Because I went there to my boss was telling me that I had an issue, right? I found out after doing this program, no, I don't have the issue. You got the issue. Okay. So that was it in Colgate Palmolive. So when I got to the place in South Carolina, well, go back to the training. So at the end of the training that I had in Greensboro, I asked the lady that was running it, I said, I think I would like to become a facilitator. She said, really? I think you'd be a good one. If you can come back and train with the lead facilitator 3 times a week at a time, I'll certify you. So part of my developmental plan when I went back was to get certified. So I got certified after about 6 months. So I had that under my belt when I left the job. And I could do speaking, I could do executive coaching, strategic plans. So I had that skill set. And so I had that in my toolbox. And I just started calling people up and saying, this is what I can do. Can I help you? And because of the relationships that I had with people, that's kind of how I got to work.
With that, I'm curious how you shifted the perspective then, because I think a lot of the times people who are more like organizationally inclined, it's like you get into like the team building, and you're naturally going to lean into the leadership skills. But then there's also this weird thing where it's like there's also the certain point where you're just kind of leading yourself as the entrepreneur. How did you make that transition and try to apply those same leadership skills? We joke all the time down on our own calls. I don't know how much we've said on the podcast, but doctor, heal thyself, coach thyself type of thing. I'm like, all right, Carl, like, how are you going to apply these things for yourself? What was that transition like?
Yeah, that's a good point. Trying to do the same thing that I'm telling people, get clear about where you want to go. I went through this program called Gold Mine Training when I was at Procter & Gamble. And the guy that led it was a Navy jet pilot. So he had some military experience. But anyway, the process basically was, in everybody's life, there's what he calls 7 pillars, right? 7 pillars in life: family, social, how you get along with people, finances, career, intelligence, learning, and faith. So you take those 7 pillars and you brainstorm things that you want to do in your life in those categories, right? Anyway, you go through the process. At the end of the process, you identify what are the top 3 items that are most important for you now that you can work on. And then you put together an action plan to do those things. So it gets you focused on, what's important and things like that. So, but a lot of what I did was, it's kind of like a consultant, so you're consulting operations, which you've been in, and you're coaching people and things like that. I've always had a mind of a coach. My high school coach was the third most influential person in my life. He's the one that sent the recruiter to my high school to recruit me to play football to Naval Academy, and I know what Naval Academy was. So I've always had a coaching mentality, and you go into the military, and there's a lot of coaching there, and just kind of, that was kind of the MO that I had.
It just made me think one of my favorite vet questions to ask. What's something that you learned at the academy that's like still a flat ass rule, or maybe it's like this is the thing that keeps me focused?
A couple. One is, I think there's a couple of different organizations that you can learn this in. You can learn it in a sports team. You can learn it in the military. But it's camaraderie, building relationships. That's foundational. That's fundamental. And so that's something that I learned. And I've still got close relationships with people that I hadn't seen. So when I was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma 14 years ago, I reached out to the president of my class at the Naval Academy. He reached out to a company mate of mine named Keith. Keith put together a GoFundMe program before GoFundMe was in existence. My classmates and alumni supported me financially for an entire year, many of which I hadn't seen in 30 years because of the relationships that we had developed. So relationships are foundational. And the other one is, we had this thing where at the Naval Academy, you could go to a test, right? And the people leaving the test could tell you what was on the test, and that wasn't cheap. We call that getting the gouge, right? So getting the gouge is just like I did with the people. Okay, I got this position. I want to be a plant manager. Give me the gouge. Tell me what I need to do to be successful. So always asking those questions about, learn from the best of the best. What can you tell me that can help me? So those are two pivotal pieces that I think that I learned there that are very, very good. When I went to flight school, I talked to people that were classmates of mine that were there before me. What do I need to focus on? So if you're doing that, then you can spend your time on stuff that's very, very productive, because a lot of times you can be studying stuff, but you really don't need to study that. You need to study this. You need to know this. You need to go into the simulator and practice that, So I've kind of used that throughout my life. Even with kids. When I was at Procter & Gamble, I met a couple. He was actually the third Black manager in all of Procter & Gamble. And he wrote a book called The Black Manager in Corporate America. I had a classmate of mine in high school came to visit me, and he worked for the CIA. And I said, why was he in Cincinnati? He was in Cincinnati because this couple was consulting the CIA. So I said, well, I'd like to meet them. So I met Floyd and Jackie Dickens while they were there. We became friends. I learned from them. They had three very successful kids. I'm thinking, it's not an accident. Tell me what you did. So they told me what they did. They says, well, when we have a meeting with the teacher, the child goes with us. The child understands what the expectations are. The child understands what their role is. That teaches the child how to speak to power in a productive way, right? They had a basement. They bought a pool table, put the pool table in the basement, and had neighbors' kids come over to their house and play in their house. Therefore, they got to teach them the values that they wanted to teach them. They all went to a predominantly Black school initially, Howard University, all of them. And then one got a master's degree in physics, one got a law degree, and one got an MBA. That was they consciously did that. So I'm learning from the best of the best. Ongoing.
I'll be honest. When you said pool table, I thought you were going to say that they taught them geometry. That's where my mind was. Oh yeah, what a great tool to teach geometry and physics. Right?
See, I was stuck on entrepreneurship. I was thinking, is being a pool shark a business? I don't.
Now I had a buddy growing up that had a pool table in the garage, and Yeah, pool shark was a business back then. I'd just say.
I visited a college a couple of months ago at their student center. They had a pool table. They had all kinds of stuff. Nobody's playing those games now. Nobody. They're on the phone.
That's too bad, folks. Get up, break out that pool cue. Don't hit your friend with it. Use it to play pool. I know it's tempting. It is tempting. I can feel that desire right now of swinging a pool cue because it's fun. But don't do that. You learn to play pool and interact with people. There's your foot stomper for today, which also leads me to what I learned today. And it's going to be another foot stomper for me, is how important relationships are, but don't fake it. Good grief. Don't be that guy that's got the list of 5 questions that you just go in there and it's like a canned recording. Develop a relationship. Be genuine in developing relationships, up and down, above you and below you, and to your left and right. I mean, it's so important in life, and your success will be so much more enriched by doing that. Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Yeah, for me, it's actually on the relationships piece also. And I thought it was interesting in that conversation about the relationship as part of like that meritocracy. And I think that's an interesting piece because we tend to separate it like, oh, it's being a kiss ass, it's brown nose, and it's these kind of things there. It's like, no, that is part of it. We are social creatures inside an organization with other people, and you got to know how to play that organization to an extent. There is a meritocracy point of that relationship. And I think that's a really interesting piece of the perspective there when you start thinking about promotions and those kind of things. And I also got to throw in the bonus that apparently the sun is bleaching my hat, so I got to stop drying them in the sun. I don't know, put them in the dryer then? It doesn't make any sense to me. You
live in the damn desert, boy. Just hang them up in the house. Carl, how about you, man? What'd you learn?
Yeah, I learned reinforcing the fact that, it's all about relationships and reconnecting with experiences that I had. There was another story I was going to tell you about relationships. Oh, so I met when I was at the Naval Academy, there was a young captain in the Marine Corps. And he was working for, he was there at the academy as a captain. And he and some family members went to a picnic, 4 cars in the caravan or whatever. And a guy starts shooting, kills the uncle, paralyzes his wife from the waist down, right? He continues in the Marine Corps, becomes a 2-star. I had a chance to work with him after he left the Marine Corps at the company that he was at, right? And he told me, he said, we used to have these assessments when I was in the Marine Corps, the general officers, and they had 4 quadrants. And there was a cluster in this quadrant, there was a cluster in this quadrant, and there was one small dot in this quadrant over here. That was me. He says, because once I had that happen to me in my life, I was not going to fake anything. I was going to be authentic, and I was going to do what I thought was right. So I had a chance to work with him after he left the Marine Corps. And then I talked to several people that worked with him while he was in the Marine Corps. And they all said the same thing. They said, General Stanley, when you talked to him, you knew you had his undivided attention. And he would do whatever he needed to do to make sure that you were okay. There's this myth about military officers and leaders in the military saying, do as I say, not as I do. Further from the truth. Those that are very good leaders do what we're talking about. Build relationships, take care of your people.
Yeah, that's awesome. Carl, how do folks find you, follow you, see what you have happening next?
I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook. I've got a website, www.carlsharpersonjr.com. If you Google my name, you'll find me on some things and podcasts and other things that I've done. So I'm pretty easy to find.
Awesome. Carl, man, it has been quite the privilege and honor to have you spend some time with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Camden, run us out as you take your coffee sip.
I know. Mistimed. I thought I had the window there. Sorry. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Carl H. Sharperson Jr. for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass it along to other lifelong learners in your tribe so that they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, that full archive of episodes available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again, and we'll see you all next time.